that you know how to make all of the different types of mini mosaic tiles, you're ready to go, and you can mix and match them into a variety of projects. Probably the simplest project to do would be something like a trip around the world where you have only squares. In this particular case, I have 1-inch square rotary cut squares of fabric, and I'm using the mini mosaic 1-inch grid, and I've laid them out onto a piece of interfacing and fused them in place, and then I simply trim away and stitch as before. First of all, with the seams all going in one direction and pressed open, and then stitching them in the other direction and pressing them open. And I now have a trip around the world panel which is ready to go into any project. Here's the finished mini mosaic trip around the world quilt, and also a much smaller trip around the world panel used in the show bag. And how about this for a nifty pattern which only uses squares? Take a 1.5-inch strip of fabric and use some satin stitching to stitch straight down the center of it, and then use some freezer paper templates to simply cut out some stem square tiles, like so. Here's some that I've done earlier. You simply cut them apart and then cut around the freezer paper and peel it off, and you'll have a perfect stem tile, which you can then put into a pattern such as our rosebud row pattern. Here are our rosebud row projects. We have a bag or a quilt or a table runner, and you can see how versatile this block is. Another way of combining tiles would be to combine squares and half-square triangles, such as we've done on the Friendship Star chain mini mosaic quilt here. This is the little quilt, but you could make a smaller version of the project and simply make panels for a placemat. Or indeed, you could make, if you really want to make lots of them, you could make something like a table runner. And these are nothing but squares and half-square triangle tiles. Another quilt which combines squares and half-square triangle tiles is the Split 9 Patch mini mosaic quilt. And there are many other patterns that you could probably think of yourself that would use just those two types of tiles. Here's another nifty way to combine some tiles. Here I've combined quarter square triangle tiles, half square triangle tiles, and square tiles to make our Ohio Ribbon Star mini mosaic cushion cover. Just as a reminder, all of our mini mosaic projects start with the tiles fused onto a piece of interfacing. Here's the Ohio Ribbon Star quilt. Here it is with the seams all sewn in one direction. And here's the panel with all of the stitching done before being quilted into the finished project. And of course, you could always make tiles of your own. Here, for example, I've taken a piece of gridded freezer paper and drawn a half trapezoid line down the center of the square, and I can actually use that as a template placed onto a set strip of fabric. And when I cut these apart, I end up with a half trapezoid tile, which I could actually use in a project such as our Three Solations mini mosaic quilt here, which I'm just now finishing. I hope you enjoyed learning about mini mosaics today, and I think you'll agree that the techniques that are involved would be applicable to create any number of projects.